What exactly is wrong with the traditional recognition gift program? Well, first, what is that? It means we make a promise to a fundraiser that if they raise a certain amount of money, we're going to give them a gift post-event. That's how 90% of recognition gift programs work. And in 3 decades, we have not changed that pattern. Except for some upgrades for technology, we really haven't changed that at all, in spite of everything that we've learned about human decision-making. Number 2, product delivered post-event can have some impact on this year's revenue as long as it's paired with the right communications. But it's really largely about reinforcing the identity, the attachment of that person to their tribe, which means that the bulk of the impact is next year. Number 3, when we deliver a recognition gift product to a person's home, we do it in a completely private recognition gift ceremony. Completely private recognition gift ceremony. Those words don't even make sense together. Next, being recognized is joyful, it's powerful, and for some unknown reason, we decided they only get to have that joy once a year after the event when it can't impact this year's fundraising. And then last, we've been training people to fundraise for product, and that's not positive. We knew this from watching public media, and we still went and did it. Darn. So, I want to take you through how we got to where we are today. And I want to start in the way back when we started this company, or I started this company, which was the day after I got fired from another job. And we'll talk about that in a bar one day. Way back in 1989, behind the scenes, how were we talking about product? What did it sound like?
Raise $500 and get a suite trombones for Venezuela Cup.
That's what it sounded like, pretty much. So back then, you know, we had always had tension with product. We knew it. And for a couple of decades, we've known that using gifts to motivate behavior can lead to problems. If we put an incentive out there, and that's the language we used then, we could get people to fundraise. It felt like a quid pro quo, but it worked. But we saw in the data something weird. When we gave someone a better gift, a nicer gift, a more valuable gift, the less the fundraiser who took it came back the next year. And if we used gifts that were called fungible, something like a TV or a grill or a tent, something that could be later sold, not that they would, but they could, we call it fungible. And what we found is that that effect was even bigger when we used that type of gift. So while this quid pro quo worked, or seemed to, in the moment, there were future deleterious effects. So then we went to 2005. And what were we saying about product in 2005?
We just know you can make it to $500. Keep it going. You're almost there. There's a sweet cabinet for you to show all your friends you're committed.
That literally is the language that we used and that many of us are still using. So while we knew that the fungible thing was bad, and we'd come to understand why, we were putting people in a transactional relationship. That's why it was bad. But what we also knew was that there was another body of work that said, you know, if it can't be considered valuable enough to be paid, to be fungible, then it won't put someone in a transactional relationship with us. So at that point, we started recommending to our clients, you know what, give a gift with a lower perceived value. And we kept pulling back on that and get it less and less valuable. And what we were doing is applying behavioral economics. And it worked better than before. It worked pretty well. And then let's go to today. How do we talk about product today?
Sorry, we blew the transition. You care. That's the only reason you would have gone out of your way to raise $500. You will be responsible for curing this disease because you are a good and caring person. Thank you. P.S. Our gift in thanks.
So that handling is really, really different. We had been reading for years about donor-centric efforts, and that made a lot of sense to us. And in fact, we thought that's what we were doing. But we started digging in more deeply yet again. And what we learned led us somewhere new. In 2017, we wrote a book called Dollar Dash, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. And that book encapsulated peer-to-peer and behavioral economics. And while everything in it is relevant and true, there's more. It's deeper. We just didn't go far enough. So let's do that. So Otis is not going to use his radio voice, which I particularly enjoy, actually. And he is going to show us what social science tells us about giving rewards. Buckle up.
Yeah, you know, psychologists have been talking about these, what they call free choice behaviors, things that people do because they want to do them or because they love to do them in some cases for a long time. And I like to use this example. Oops, we skipped a slide. Sorry. There it was. It was it. Imagine that was that slide. Imagine you invite your sister over to help you clean out your garage one Saturday afternoon. Okay. Would you say, you know, if you stay an hour, I'll give you a water bottle. And if you stay for 2 hours, I'll give you a $25 Starbucks gift card. And if you stay for four hours, I'll give you a down-filled jacket in your size. You know, you never say that. You know, what you do is she'd come over, you'd have a good time, you'd clean out the garage, and you'd give her a hug, and you'd tell her she was the greatest sister in the world, and then maybe you'd give her a bottle of wine, and as she left, and she'd enjoy it later on and think back fondly about your day. Well, you know, somewhere along the line, we've all told our constituents that they're a member of our family, but we just don't treat them like one. And again, there's a lot of research in this area. This one was done 21 years ago. It's one of the best. It's if you remember your statistics classes, this is a meta-analysis. So this was an analysis of 128 studies on giving extrinsic rewards to people who were doing these intrinsic behaviors, things that they wanted to do. And you can I've kind of summed it up in one short little graph here. And this is it. So to interpret this, the black means neutral. People were no more or less likely to repeat the behavior. Red is that they were less likely to repeat the behavior, and green is that they're more likely to repeat the behavior. So just simple thank you, or in what we would call impact communications in nonprofit. These are things that happen because of your activity. That tended to make people want to come back and do the behavior again, to donate again, as a matter of fact. Red, people were less likely to repeat the behavior, so tangible gifts had a demotivating impact on people. When you broke that down, it's interesting, unexpected gifts had a neutral effect. I'd like to test that. This really wasn't done in the nonprofit world specifically, and I think that branded items are, as an unexpected gift, is a really good device. Expected gifts, telling people that if you raise $500, if you raise $1,000, if you register, you're going to get these gifts. It was demotivating. People tended to not come back and repeat the behavior. So again, this research has been out there for a long time. And although this is a 20-year-old study, there are many, many more current studies than that. Katrina?
So, you know, this is not in our notes, honey, but I did want to say, you know, we've done a lot of studies and research about recognition gifts, and they all came out saying this works. And there's some reasons that they came out that way that we're going to hit later, but I'm sure in some of your minds, you're thinking about all these analyses that have shown that it works. And there's good reason for the way the data came out. So, but to this, why does recognition work at all? You know, it works because we have embedded inside us this deep thing that some would call a feature and some would call a flaw. And it is that we are desperate to be seen. Recognition is being seen.
Yeah, and there is a good reason why recognition is so motivating. Let's go into evolutionary psychology a little bit. This is a picture of the African savannah. This is where 98% of our ancestors lived in small groups, and this is where our modern brains evolved to survive. And you know, the biggest factor for survival on the savannah was sociability, how well you got along with and interacted with members of your group. And humans over the millions or thousands, hundreds of thousands of generations became hardwired for sociability. And it turns out that recognition is a major social cue. Being recognized by your group told you that when there were resources to be shared, you would be included. And that was a matter of survival. So our antenna for recognition became very, very finely tuned over the generations. And, you know, this was a theory in psychology for many years. And then about 15 years ago, MRI machines, brain scanners, became very widely available to psychologists, and they proved it. Now, this is a picture of Barack Obama. It's not about Barack Obama, it's about eating, but it makes me happy to see Barack Obama, so I put his picture in there. It turns out that when you put people into brain scanners and have them read simple little recognition statements, things like, when I need help, you're always the person I can turn to. The reward pathway of the brain that lights up is the same reward pathway that lights up when people eat their favorite food. So that's how fundamental the response to recognition is. And it's a very interesting area of study. It turns out you would expect that for people that you know who recognize you. It turns out you have the same effect for people who are complete strangers who recognize you. Again, that's how finely tuned our antenna is. And we know that.
Oh, wait. Honey, can you go back?
Go back. Did I forget something?
I just want to look at it for another minute.
Okay, we're moving on. And we know that people want to be recognized. You know, as I got into this research 7 years ago after I met Katrina, I was a little bit surprised to learn that of the billions of dollars that are donated to charity every year, less than 1% is donated anonymously. And psychologists also know that people behave in what they call more pro-social behaviors, just doing good things when they're in public as opposed to when they're in private. So we're going to talk about philanthropic psychology now. Katrina mentioned that in 2017, we wrote $, the behavioral economics of peer-to-peer fundraising. Philanthropic psychology is the next step beyond behavioral economics. Behavioral economics, you probably heard about nudges. Behavioral economics is about getting people to do something in the moment, like donate, like volunteer, like whatever it is that you're asking them to do on behalf of your nonprofit. Philanthropic psychology is about sustainability. And in fact, the work is in this area is being led by Dr. Adrian Sargent and Dr. Jen Shang at the UK Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. So let's talk for a minute about what it's not. I just had to put this up here, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, Maslow is still spinning in his grave. It was a stage theory. He never intended it to be used as a theory of motivation. So Maslow is not where it's at. So according to philanthropic psychologists, what affects a person's decision to help a nonprofit organization when they read messaging or get communications? Now, most of us think that it's the emotion of the appeal, that we have to make people feel some way in order to get them to act. And that is important. But philanthropic psychologists, the research tells us that there's something that's more important. And that is the supporters' goals, their identity. Am I an animal rights advocate if I'm reading something about rescuing dogs? About the perceived impact. What are my goals? What do I want to accomplish through my philanthropic activity? Do I want to feed school kids who don't have school lunches now? So it's these supporter goals that are really more important than the emotion of the appeal. And we're going to take a look at, well, I forgot about this. So people have many identities. I'm a University of Virginia alumni. I'm a father. I'm a fundraising professional. I'm a husband. And so there are many identities that we can call out in order to connect with me. I want to show you some research that was done by, I always will butcher her name, Kiki Koumouridou. She's Greek, over in the UK as well. And this was a Facebook ad that tailored messaging to the recipient's identity. Now, these went to only doctors, nurses, people in the medical profession. And this is for Make-A-Wish. And so the one size fits all message was, when you donate and help grant a wish, you help her fight her illness. Okay? And then in the other condition, they just added one sentence: as a medical professional, you know the heartache of a child diagnosed with a critical illness. And then the same. So that was the only difference in the
So
messaging.
Otis,
Yes.
before you go ahead, I want to, because this is a heavily peer-to-peer audience, I want to connect this to, this would be the same as an acquisition message for a peer-to-peer fundraiser, completely the same in terms of how the human will react. Just because it's direct response does not make it not viable for peer-to-peer acquisition.
Absolutely. So the identity-based messaging increased the response by 41%. A huge effect. One other example I wanted to show you. This is a little bit different. This is an identity-based ad versus a gift ad. Now, my family are all hunters. I grew up in the Midwest in Iowa. My cousins and grandfather, uncles all traipsed through the woods in the middle of winter, hunting pheasants and so forth. They were all members of Ducks Unlimited. So I know this organization well. So this was a Facebook ad to get people to sign up for Ducks Unlimited membership. Backed by popular demand, join, renew, or extend your Ducks Unlimited membership today and receive the Ducks Unlimited quilted jacket as our gift to you. Now, that response rate was 1.3% of people that saw that ad on Facebook converted. And then they tried an identity-based message to get people to sign up for Ducks Unlimited, which was this, the conservationist identity. And they, by the way, they bought they bought lists from organizations like the Audubon Society, other organizations that had conservationists in it. And they said, as a conservationist, you know how important the wetlands are to flood control, clean water and the wildlife, we call them home, help our shared ecosystem and be a supporter of one of the world's largest conservation organizations. In other words, no jacket. And the conversion rate for this ad was identical.
So if I could jump in here, this is stunning. And you got to wonder, why didn't we know about it? And the reason we didn't know about it is because we didn't want to jump into someone else's silo for information. That was direct response. And we're over here in peer-to-peer. And we didn't go there. When we did our analyses in the past, all of us, we've compared a gift ad, so to speak, whether it's an email or social, mainly email. We compared it to messaging that had nothing to do with the identity of the recipient. So if we were going to message without identity attributes, the way that this is done, we better have a jacket because it would have failed without it. So this is a head-to-head in a way that we've never gone head-to-head before. Having this type of identity messaging, we simply haven't done in peer-to-peer. We simply haven't done it. And we needed the jacket if we didn't have it. That's what it came down to.
Oops. There we go.
So how do we, normal humans who are not PhDs in psychology, how do we make use of this? And the framework which we've created to help do that is called you-centric design. And by using this, that's how people like you and me can accomplish it. Otis?
Sure. I'm going to talk about messaging for a few minutes. Jeff Brooks has a wonderful website, Future Fundraising Now. If you don't subscribe to it, I recommend it highly. He some time ago described the way most nonprofits talk to their supporters as the Batman model. And I tell you, this is not the model that you want to aspire to. In the Batman model, Batman's the boss, Robin is the helper, his sidekick. Batman gets all the glory. He drives the Batmobile. He's got a cooler costume. He's got a utility belt. The Batman model puts the organization in the starring role, and the donor is the helper, the Robin character, whose donations or support enable the organization's work. And so Batman fundraising is full of phrases like, please donate so we can help us support the children, support this great work, and so forth. And the you-centric model represents really a fundamental shift in your thinking. Donors are not giving to you or fundraising for you. They're giving and fundraising through you to make something they care about happen. And remember, we talked earlier about in philanthropic psychology, it's the supporter's goals. It's their identity. Is this who I am? The kind of person that saves animals, that feeds children and so forth. and what are the goals that I have? So this is a real shift. Now, it's understandable why organizations don't talk like this. So this is how most nonprofits talk. I call it you whatever. We did this, we did that, we were amazing, and by the way, thank you. Now, they do that because they think that they have to prove to the supporter that their missions are worthy of their support. But it turns out that this raises much more money. A you-centric wrote, because of you, all these amazing things will happen. Without you, they won't. Katrina?
So back to today and to the future. And I want to also acknowledge we've got some questions. We're going to take them all at the end, and I hope it will turn into this big group discussion. So throw in those questions. It'll help us to organize them. So back to today. The kind of messaging around gift products is you-centric messaging. That's what we're recognizing, or that's what we're recommending. We are recognizing someone for who they are versus what they did. And that's the path to more fundraising. We're going to hit the copy a little bit more here. Otis?
Yeah, I'm going to share with you. This is a copy that I wrote actually for a healthcare nonprofit a few weeks ago, and I kind of stripped out their name and so forth. Dear Margaret, I'm reaching out to you because you stood with us through thick and thin. Please step forward and make a gift again today. You can make such a difference. So, you know, that's what we ask early and often. You've fought a brutal disease. Now you're fighting 2 brutal diseases. Etc. Those suffering are more isolated than ever. And then because of you, this is what happens because of you. Please make a gift. And then it's signed by an individual, not the organization, because we want to make it as personal as possible. And then P.S. Thank you in advance for being the light in the darkness. So if there's any doubt who this message is intended for, I use the word you or your 11 times in this message. And this message probably feels different than much of the communication that you've seen, but this is a perfect example of you-centric communication. You know, right now people are feel so powerless. We've been in our homes for weeks. The weeks are going on into months. This kind of messaging really empowers people. It using BOY, because of you language. Because of you, these things happen. Before and after stories, kind of the coin and currency of nonprofit language. This person was homeless. Now they've got a roof over their heads. Telling them why you are needed. Why is this your fight? This is why you're needed, and make them a part of something that psychologists call this people's need for connectedness. Making them part of something bigger than themselves. Right now, that is so important. People feel more isolated than they probably have ever in their lives right now. And we have such a great gift to give them through nonprofit work.
So what we've demonstrated, we hope, is that youth-centric messaging makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense because it's more effective, and it's more effective because it talks about who the person is and triggers them to behaviors that reflect who they are. So is that the only place it can manifest, just in words? Or should every touch point manifest? So the words Otis has been using, you know, they can manifest in email, website, social media, print, anything. But also they can manifest in the recognition gift program, which we talked about, and how to do that, not just by what kind of gift you use, but the language with which you position it. But also, if you've got human beings talking to your constituents, shouldn't this youth-centric messaging happen there too? So now we're into not just scripting, but into training about how to talk to people. It's not that I'm asking you, Mary Beth, to help the Canine Companions for Independence to help with our walk. No, we want you to own it because it reflects who you are and language that supports that. And then lastly, and perhaps most important, in peer-to-peer, we have the ability to touch people more than most revenue channels because we create an environment that has multiple touch points, not just at the moment of donation, but at multiple points as we ask people to fundraise and ultimately donate as well. So youth-centric can manifest in event design as well. Go ahead. So when we're engaged to help a client either tune up a peer-to-peer property or to create a new one, what we typically start with are business requirements. How do you write requirements? Typically, it looks a lot like this. Raise X amount of money and X amount of time. We're going to use a staff-driven model or a volunteer-driven model. We're going to make one event versus a series of events. These are the kinds of questions that we ask. And the reason that we ask those is because we're setting the business requirements of the organization. But are those the requirements that we should be designing around? Or potentially, should it be the human being? So if we thought about it differently, if we started designing event constructs around the needs of the human being, here's one example of what that could look like. This is one business requirement. I don't want to imply that this will cure all ills, because the human is way more complex than that. But one thing we know is that human beings respond impressively to what we call the trifecta of satisfaction. Otis?
Yeah, this comes out of an area of psychology called positive psychology. It's called self-determination theory. And positive psychologists have found that people who are satisfied with various aspects of their life report having three things. They report having autonomy, a sense of self-determination, that they're in charge. They're not being micromanaged. They're not in a situation they don't want to be in. Competence. They're engaged in doing something that they can get good at, that they can be good at, successful at, and they have an opportunity to get better. And then being a part of something bigger than themselves. I mentioned earlier this need, psychologists call it connectedness, that they're involved in something that's bigger than their own self-interest, that really goes beyond them in some way.
So, does the other stuff matter? How much money, what platform, staff support model? Of course it does. It matters. But if your constituent is happy and satisfied, they'll exhibit the behaviors you want in larger percentages. This is not fluffy stuff. This is science. We're talking about designing for the ultimate consumer, the participant. If we make them happy, if we make them satisfied, they join us, they exhibit the behaviors we need because we made them happy and satisfied. So what we're going to do is use one example. So if we use you-centric design, next slide. If we use you-centric design for events, one outcome might be that we decide to use volunteer leadership. Now, right now, somewhere on the East Coast, Bob Merrill is pounding the desk because he did this, and I applaud it, with team and training. So an example of you-centric design, an outcome would be, if I'm trying to meet those three needs, what can I do in terms of designing my event construct that will give people that will give the average participant that? And one of the answers to that is volunteer leadership. Giving someone a job is the highest form of recognition. And giving someone a job also satisfies their psychological need, not just for recognition, but for autonomy and to be part of something bigger than themselves. So that's why truly volunteer-driven programs raise more than staff-driven models. An example would be, well, two good examples, Relay for Life and the Alzheimer's peer-to-peer properties. Both of them lean heavily on volunteer-driven aspects. They have a well-built out, a well-thought out, and a well-supported volunteer leadership infrastructure. That is their secret sauce. And now you understand it. They are simply meeting the emotional and psychological needs of their participants. They are satisfying their customer and making them happy. Notice that sentence had not much to do with the mission, did it? It had to do with the customer, the consumer, the participant. So another really great question, which if no one asks, I'm just going to ask it of myself. Why is it so hard to get staff to embrace a volunteer-driven model? And the answer is right there, because staff people are human too. And they fear loss of autonomy, which is definitely going to happen if you go with a volunteer-driven model. They fear loss of recognition, which if the recognition is going to the volunteers, I am playing second fiddle now. They do get to stay connected to the whole. So that is the reason most conversions fail, is because we don't address the needs of everyone. We just design and tell them to go forth without figuring out, is everybody going to be happy and meeting those needs? So lastly, like soccer, you-centric design looks easy. With soccer, virtually anyone can kick a white ball, right? It rolls. It's a huge goal. I mean, how hard can it be? It's pretty hard once you try. And youth-centric design is like that too. It's pretty hard when you start into it. And then you have the added layer of complexity of this. Let's say you got it. You wrote your design. And unlike some organizations, I know like the Hydrocephalus Association, where the whole group is bought into this, in your organization, you write copy or you do event design. And then whatever the work is you did, it's got to go to legal. It's going through Marcom. The CEO's brother Bob, who wrote a novel once, he might have some good ideas, right? And by the time it gets back to you, it looks nothing like what you started with. So this youth-centric design thing, you either embrace it as an organization or you don't, because it is tough if not everybody is bought in and has an understanding of it. So I am shocked we did this in 34 minutes. Go Otis, go Katrina. At this point, we're gonna have another poll and we're gonna start answering questions. Here we go.
I can't wait.
I know.
I just can't. The suspense is killing me.
We got at least one, y'all are crazy, give me my water bottles. I love an honest person.
We may get 90. Careful what you wish for.
I love it. I love it.
Kelly, let's see the numbers.
All right, very good. Well, happily, there are a lot of people who are acting in line with these principles. That's fantastic. And I love it. And there's some who I think we're doing this, which is vulnerable and honest, and I appreciate it. And then the next category would be, we're definitely not doing this and it's gonna be a hard sell. And you're right, it's gonna be a hard sell. Without breaking confidences, I can share with you that, often it's the volunteers themselves who make this hard to do. They are convinced, volunteer leadership, that you can't make this kind of turn. And so, what are we talking about? We got to bring a PhD into every volunteer committee meeting. Tough, but at least the knowledge, we have to get there so that we can make this turn. Otis, did you want to comment on any of the poll answers?
No, I'm actually heartened by this, and I can tell you that organizations that have embraced this approach are experiencing fundraising at record-breaking levels right now in the coronavirus era. People are anxious to give. I know a Better Business Bureau poll that came out of 186 nonprofits and their supporters, came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago, said that I believe 53% of people said they were going to keep up the same level of giving. Another 35% said they were going to be increasing their level of giving in the next year. So people want to participate, and this is not a time to sit on the sidelines.
Yes, completely agree. So we're going to run to the questions now, and we're going to ask them out loud. Okay, so yes, we're sharing the slides and recording, of course. A question from an anonymous attendee. So still give a gift with thank you verbiage, or is the thanks the gift? Otis, you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, I got lost. So what was the question again? One more time.
So still give a gift with the thank you verbiage, or is the gift the thanks?
Oh, I would thank people in as many ways as you possibly can. You cannot thank people too much. In fact, there was a fascinating study that came out I think the title of it was One Additional Thank You. And these were to repeat donors. And throughout the year, they just did one additional message to some of their donors, thanking them. And the difference between all the other things controlled for, that group gave 41% more than the other donors who just didn't get that message. So you cannot thank people enough. And, you know, if I can say one other thing about branded product, you know, and I personally believe that unexpected gifts are a good thing. I also believe, you know, I brand myself in a lot of ways. I've got a University of Virginia ring on. I've got one on stuck on my car. I think that merchandise that's branded, very modest merchandise that's branded with your logos and stuff, can help a person remind them of their identity. And so I think that there's some positive. I don't want to sound like we're down on all gifts or anything, but I think that the expectation of a gift is decidedly negative. I think that people should be getting thanked with unexpected gifts. Again, if you do it for your sister, I think it's a great rule of thumb. Would you treat your sister this way, or would she think that you're in a dysfunctional relationship? Because we need to get out of these dysfunctional relationships with our supporters.
Yeah. And I want to lean into what Otis just said. We are not down on gifts. We're down on the positioning of gifts and the way that they're given. I, like Otis, believe that having a visual symbol of my attachment is not a bad thing. It's how I get it that we got to fix. We got to fix that. But yeah, like him, of course, all my stuff has Virginia Tech hokey stuff on it because we have a mixed marriage. All right. So Amanda.
Oh, let's not open that can of worms.
It gets ugly. Okay. Amanda from HA, one of my favorite people. And I just wanted to read your comment out loud to the group because I love it. Amanda says, I wanted to go on the poll between, I think we're doing it and we're doing it, laugh out loud, or we're trying to at HA as we do you-centric design right now. So they're moving the entire organization's communication pattern in that way. And if she were on the panel, I'm sure she'd say, and sometimes it gets really hard because we have a lot of habit to overcome. Also from Amanda, we had the question, Otis, I think this is about the study that you put forth. Did the study look at motivation to return based on a personal connection to a cause, or for people that were not connected, so less inclined to return?
This was not a study. I'm sorry. Are we talking about the meta-analysis? I can't
Yes.
see the questions here because of my screen sharing, so that's why
Sure.
I'm a little confused. Could you ask me the question one more time?
Sure. And Amanda, maybe you could clarify actually whether it's the meta study that we looked at or the two small case studies. So I'll let you clarify that to me if you're still on.
Just said, yes, it's the meta-analysis. She's asking.
Yeah, the meta-analysis is, again, a meta-analysis is an examination of many studies. So they kind of combine the results. And this was not specifically in the nonprofit realm. This is that analysis was just done with giving people extrinsic rewards, things when they were involved in intrinsically motivated behavior, things that they wanted to do just because that was the right thing to do or they loved to do it. And what was the impact of them getting rewards, tangible rewards, or just verbal rewards on whether or not they continue to do that thing in the future.
All right, I'm going to go to the next question. Are you saying I can recognize fundraisers without using a thing? My budget would improve in a huge way if we didn't use this stuff. No stuff or limited stuff. What is the recommendation? I'll take that one if that's all right. Number one, going to you-centric design is not free. It's hard. I think Amanda's listening and she, one of her comments says fun exercise, but yes, hard. You know, it takes completely revamping all your materials and even down to your event design. So, you know, I cautiously say it might save you money in the long run, but I also, again, go back to the belief that in and of itself, the gift is not bad and can have very positive outcome. It's how the person gets the gift. If it's a quid pro quo, it's going to have a negative long-term impact, but it doesn't have to be that. And if we can get, you know, if we could get every person in Real Life for Life to wear the t-shirt they got, it literally every person in America would be wearing that t-shirt. So I think it's the way that we bestow it, but getting it on their bodies, getting themselves to see themselves in it, absolutely a win. So yes and no. Yes, I think we can reduce our reliance on gifts, and we definitely got to change the way that we bestow gifts, the way the person actually gets them. But I think there is a place for them as well, which is why, just to say this out loud, we interviewed a lot of partners for Recognition Gift Program Fulfillment. And we ended up with a guy I have known for, I want to say like 25, 28 years, who has been my competitor half my adult life. And I've always had a lot of respect. And Bob Southard with Halo is who we chose. And we chose him for this particular thing because he gets peer-to-peer. He understands the complex nature of delivering certificates and the gifts and all that. And I will talk him into my way of thinking, coming for you, Bob. And it's going to be brilliant. It's going to be great. So we consider it a marriage made in heaven. So hopefully that answered my question. We have a comment from one of my great friends and someone I respect a lot, Sandra Hijikata. In my experience, marketers are reluctant to use the you/donor-centered speak. Do you have any suggestion on how to help this group understand how this is critical for successful acquisition or renewal fundraising efforts? My recommendation is to put them in a small room with the giant psychologist and let him beat them over the head with it. It actually just takes training. They don't come to belief through experience because they avoid the experience. So we actually have to take them down this long and convoluted path to help them understand how humans make decisions. And they don't often get access to that kind of information. So, in their defense, it's not intuitive. It's evolutionary psychology has us doing things that don't make sense as human beings. And, when Otis and I were first dating, actually, one of the first books he shared with me was Predictably Irrational. And I think that encapsulates human beings. The people resistant to you are being resistant to you because what you're suggesting sounds counterintuitive, even though it's right. But human beings are counterintuitive in our behaviors. Otis, do you want to layer in?
Yeah, let me just, weigh in a little bit about, again, it's understandable why organizations communicate this way, because they feel, as I said before, they feel like they need to convince people that their causes are worthy, but that short circuits their efforts. People really want to hear about themselves. And I hear about, well, we have to be careful of the organization's brand all the time. The organization's brand, this is how I think of it, is nothing more than how people feel about your organization. That is your brand. So, when Ford Motor was making crummy cars 25 years ago, they could put out all the great media about how great a company they were, but people knew that their brand was awful because they were driving terrible cars. Only by making better cars did they improve their brand, which is what they are now. So it's just only about how people feel about your organization. And, a great exercise is this. What did I do this week to make my supporters feel happy? Because if you're doing that, if you're asking yourself that question every week, you're going to have a thriving organization. I guarantee it. That is one of the crucial things to do. And it's just not what I see nearly enough. I do see it, but I don't see it enough.
All right, I'm going to work through the questions line by line. Some of them are kind of hard because we don't have a lot of information, so we'll do our best. What if you work internationally and do not have a volunteer base? I'll jump in first. The you-centric design you can apply to direct response, major giving, middle giving, social media giving, and peer-to-peer. So, the technique is applicable across the board. If you don't have a volunteer base, there's probably a reason for that, and there's more to know. Would love to talk to you. Give me a call. Okay, next one. Our organization has pretty clear guidelines around privacy, and we are proud of maintaining our confidentiality. How do you balance confidentiality and privacy with donor recognition? Good one. Well, number one, I think you can ask for permission to give recognition, and many of them will say no, but some will say yes. Otis, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that person will be surprised at how many people say yes. Again, I was surprised to learn that less than 1% of charitable donations are done anonymously. And even those donations, somebody on a board knew or someone knew. So people seek out recognition, and I think certainly done in the right way that people would embrace it. So,
and I also want to point out, I chastise my 30 years of personal behavior of sending recognition gifts to someone's home and for this private recognition ceremony, but it still worked, right? So your email in recognition, even though that person's just reading it, still works. It definitely works. I alluded to making it public because there's another body of work that says pro-social behaviors exhibited in public can really motivate people. So, you can be private and bestow recognition and totally will work. If you can be public, it'll work better. Otis, did you want to address that?
No,
Nope. Okay.
you said it.
Excellent. Leaving his books by the side of the bed is working. Okay, here's next. We are in Plan B for a virtual event for August 1st. We need to make this a 2-hour event, and we need to focus on the foster families having fun. However, behind the scenes, lost my question. Behind the scenes, we need to raise $30,000. How do we get a volunteer-driven virtual event without having any idea how we need to do it ourselves? I am assuming that we need some idea of what to do and to be able to create it. The place to start is how to make people happy, how to make them feel good or feel less afraid and more connected. That is the design beginning. And then you go from there. You can plug in a lot of different things in terms of the activity once you've drawn the box, the business requirement for the human. That's a longer conversation, which I would love to have. And your name looks familiar, although I can't place it right now. All right, and next one. We often feel like we need to offer something to get new donors who currently don't have a connection to our organization. Can you speak to that? Otis, you want to take that one?
You don't have to give anything. You just don't have to give anything. We just have to get over this transactional idea. If you do give something, don't tell them they're going to get it. That the best way to do that is for it to show up at the door. I got I wasn't going to talk about this, but I got a call the other day from I gave $100 to the Virginia Commonwealth University, where I got my master's degree, psychology department. I got this, or the humanities and sciences department. I got this call. It lasted about 10 minutes from this student. She said she was home and she was a volunteer, and she just called to say thank you because she was on scholarship, and she told me a little bit about herself. And it was just wonderful. It made me feel so good. So a 5-minute phone call, never underestimate that. Getting volunteers just to make phone calls on behalf of your organization and not ask for any more money, but just to say thank you is just, it was a great experience. And I thought to myself, gee, this is what I've been telling people for years. And it just happened to me. And it did. It made me feel so good.
Beth, if you want to have some fun sometime, ask John Varanis, who's the Chief Development and Marketing Officer up at Humane Society. Ask him about socks. Like, John, how do you feel about socks? And he will lose his mind and start screaming because, he walked into an organization that used socks as a premium to bring on new donors. And, the statistics, nothing said it was a great idea because the people who did come in came in at a loss because of the cost of the thing, and they didn't stay. So yeah, you don't need anything. Next question. We have a passive gift program. We don't really promote it. It is self-select. If they have raised the money and want a gift, they can request it. We don't automatically send gifts out. I think what you're describing is exactly the way that we do or have done for years, recognition gift programs. Otis, correct me if you feel differently. It feels to me that the well has already been poisoned by simply having the quid pro quo out there, published in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Again, we have nothing against gifts, modest gifts. It's the expectation that sets up this. And, Katrina talked about the predictability irrational. A lot of this is unconscious, when you get a gift card, by the way, there's a wonderful book on this. I can't remember the author's name, but it's a little short book called Why We Work. And it's a TED Talk book, so it's really short. But it talks about why people work and why things are demotivating to people. And again, it's that expectation that they're going to get something in return for something that suggests to them, again, unconsciously, hey, maybe this isn't, maybe I'm not here because of my own free will. Maybe I'm here because that jacket was nice, and it really wasn't a very nice jacket anyway.
Just so you guys know, I'm working through the Q&A box, and then I'm going to go to the chat box with any comments there. But multitasking didn't work well for me. We just did a COVID campaign that was very successful. We're now doing our annual dog walk virtually. We are just launching peer-to-peer for the first time and using gifts at different fundraising levels. Probably because I told you to. I'm sorry. How do we establish peer-to-peer for the first time without something like this? We did not use any gifts, just thank yous for the COVID campaign. My response would be people are people. For the same reasons that your COVID campaign was successful, your peer-to-peer can be successful. Just don't. It would be my recommendation. That doesn't mean you don't use some gifts, but positioning them in a quid pro quo. You fundraise this much, I give you this. Negative in the long run. Otis, anything from you?
No, that's it. I think that communicating with people at levels is fine. I wouldn't talk about so much about what they've. I'm reaching out today because you've raised $500. I'd say I'm reaching out today because you're a caring and compassionate person that XYZ, and because of what you've done, because of you, the BOY, because of you, 80 kids are going to get lunches this month when they couldn't have gotten it in school. So very specific things like that.
William White, this is not a question, but suggestion, and I love it. We started sending old-fashioned Valentine cards to our team captains. We got calls and emails from people thanking us for thanking them. Blew us away. Reaching them at unexpected times was the key. Love that.
Let me just say something. If you're thank you messaging, you can't thank people enough. Thank them. And if the comment that comes back from management says this is too syrupy, sweet, and sentimental, you're on the right track. Those are the kinds of things. Valentine's cards, that is brilliant, that people love to get. I had we work some with an organization that serves babies, and I just often wonder, how about just finding a cute baby and a little bubble that says you love me and I love you? I'd love to get that in an email. Those are the wonderful kinds of things that you can do to thank people, and it doesn't have to be super sophisticated. It doesn't have to be from the board of directors.
Hey, Otis, why don't you unshare, and then our heads will be like 10 times bigger as we answer these questions. Okay, next question. What tips do you have when reading over materials or writing new material to test for you-centricness? That's yours, Otis.
I'm sorry, again, one more time.
What tips do you have when reading over materials or writing new material to test for you-centricness?
Okay, and I hate to dumb it down this much because there's a lot involved in this, but I look for a 3-to-1 ratio of you to me. If I talk about you 3 times as much as I talk about me, I'm probably on the right track. So that's my little rule of thumb.
Excellent. All right, from my good friend Diana. How do organizations make the recognition gift switch with long-term family fundraising teams who look forward to the gifts, and they are often for the child who is impacted by the mission? Oh, that's like a double backflip on a 4-inch beam right there. It's hard. It's hard. And I know that there are a lot of families who see these as collectibles. I think changing the language is the first step. Spend a year or two to simply leave your gift program in place, change the language about how it's positioned, publish the flyer, but just change the language and start to move your audience away with it, and over time try and pull it out. And then again, if you need a giant to lock in the room with your volunteer committee, I know one, so that might work too. What we find is that when we're overt with our volunteer leadership, it really goes well. Making them part of the story, helping them understand the change and why we're making it, doesn't mean we don't give them their gifts. Clearly these gifts are different for these families. So, fine, give it to them. But let's change our language so that we don't, these are warriors. The people you're talking about, they're warriors. And one of the slides Otis made me cut, was about that. It's about the difference in behavior between people who are warriors and people who just like you, and they're different. And I think in this case, you know, we may have to devise a plan to help these people transition, because it's going to be hard.
We just got a couple minutes left, Katrina.
Okay. I'm staying as long as you guys are staying.
Oh, okay. Well, we can stay. Yeah.
Yeah. Otis too. You know, I got a Happy Meal coming from McDonald's, but it'll be fine. Okay. That's like our special, you know, present to ourselves, the drive-through. So instead of giving gifts as incentives, what about non-gifts? For example, someone pays more to not get something like a t-shirt, etc. Is the psychology the same? That is I think, a complex psychological thing to dig through, but I can tell you that we tested something similar many years ago with offering as a recognition gift the ability to donate that gift to someone else. And it failed utterly. You know, Otis and I would have to have a couple of bottles of wine to figure out why, but it failed utterly, and I don't understand it still. Okay. From my friend Sandra, it is unfortunate that many vendors providing input to the marketers do not agree with this philosophy. Truth. Meaning that there is an even bigger group that needs to be trained or convinced. And Sandra, you were absolutely right. And add to that the problem that we had, which is, you know, we were so tied to product and it was top of mind and it became every answer. And for them, it's every answer too. As we transition our clients to our trusted partner, Halo, you know, we're doing it in coordination with them. So to their credit, they're leaning into this. I think they have, you know, if you do something for 36 years, you start to see the trends. And I'm sure Bob has seen some of these trends too. So, you know, we're trying to bring people along with us on this. It's going to be hard for some. All right, from Marina, how do you think the transition would be rolled out as we don't upset people who have come to expect those gifts? Same question as Diana. It's tricky, it's tough. Maybe we should do a little work on that, bring people like you and anybody else who wants to attempt this transition, which is a double black flip on a 4-inch beam, together. And again, I think it's a staged process that starts with language. All right. Someone asks, sorry if I missed this somewhere because I had to step away, but can you talk about how to remove promised gifts from an incentive program? Won't our riders be upset that the gifts they're used to receiving at certain levels are being taken away? So I want to address two things there. One thing is, if you have published a recognition gift program and anyone has fundraised in response to that offer, you now have a legal contract. So you can't just kill your program. You have to transition logically away from it. Number two, the transition is exactly the thing we're talking about. You know, it sounds like there's a critical mass of people that this would be good to talk through with. And I'm perfectly willing to do that. If you guys can hit me with an email, we'll bring together just a brainstorm group about how to do that. Should we still use triggers at levels? Good question. Otis, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, as I said before, I think it's fine. Again, not saying that I'm reaching out to you because of something that you did, but I'm reaching out to you because you're a caring, compassionate member of the XYZ community. And because of you, I can't help but write copy all the time. And because of you, dogs were rescued today and have a safe home now, you know, whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's fine to do actually, we're doing that for a couple of clients right now.
My good friend Randy says this: I assume this doesn't apply to the walk t-shirt, which is distributed at the event, the instant gratification and recognition at the event. I'm an advocate for the walk t-shirt. Otis?
You know what? I love t-shirts. The most important eyeballs that see a logo on a t-shirt are belong to the people that are wearing them. They say, I am a cancer warrior. I'm a hydrocephalus evangelist. You know, you are labeling them. They are self-labeling themselves. It gets to their identity. I think that there will always be a great place for t-shirts. You know, I was in a store, one of my rare visits out. I saw a guy in it with the American Cancer Society sweatshirt that was just in tatters, but you know, he's still wearing that ACS sweatshirt because it's meaningful. It's part of his identity.
The next person asks, what do you think about recognition of top teams and individuals with a gift/plaque? Is it just the quid pro quo level, or is it all types of recognition? I think it has to do with the promise, whether there was a promise. If you reach this level, we'll give you a plaque and we'll draw you up on stage. I think the quid pro quo-ness applies. Otis, we can work through this right now. When the gift is a plaque or a recognition on stage, do you believe that the quid pro quo still applies?
No, I do not.
No, you don't. And why is that?
I do not. Well, because, well, I assume it's unexpected. You know, I don't think that anybody said, hey, if you do this for the organization, we're going to stand you up on stage and give you a plaque. And I also think that a plaque, you know, you're talking about fungible items. A plaque is definitely not fungible. You know, you're not going to be selling a plaque on the, or, you know, it's just not that you would, but it's not something that you can do. So I think that certainly passes the test of something that is not transactional.
Very good. All right. The next person says, thinking about donors' rights, if we're saying because of you, 80 children received a meal or whatever the specific mission is, do we need to be 100% sure that we use that money for those meals / mission? Does the gift become restricted?
No. I think that there are ways to carefully word that don't sound like you've got a lawyer talking. That you can certainly craft those messages. You know, I've been writing those messages as I've tried to make the shift in my writing for organizations. I've been writing those messages for that part of messages for years, and I've never had anybody say that, oh, that's, you know, we just can't do that.
All right. Although, you know, lawyers' jobs is to tell you no. And if they don't tell you no or complexify your life in some way, then they don't have a job. So there's my personal rant. Okay. Danielle, what about triggers at levels that are mission centric? You raised X amount for research, raise 100 more, and you'll be able to fund another hour of research. Watch your dollars go further. Otis, thoughts?
Um,
It's like the best of the worst, wouldn't you think?
What's that?
It's the best way to do a bad thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I certainly understand. You know, well, here, let me answer this way. When researchers study people when researchers study people that do things over time, they continue to do things, behaviors over time. What they learned was that people think about what they've already done twice as much as what they're going to do next, and that's what motivates them. So I would, using this example, I would really load up on what you've already done, because I think that will be the most motivating thing to tell somebody that they're the kind of person that has done this, that has changed lives, that is, and then I would say, I'm sure you'd want to know that now you have the opportunity to do something else. So that's how I would phrase that one.
Very good. Marina wants to know, how do you feel about day of event recognition, like a tent with special snacks for the $1,000 club or something like that? Team tent for those that raise X. I can see good and bad in that. If it's published, it falls into the same trap of do this and get that. On the other hand, you do get to celebrate people in front of their peers immediately, which is nice. Otis, thoughts?
Yeah, you know, it gets back to the whole behavioral economics versus philanthropic psychology distinction. Behavioral economics talks about getting people to do things in the short term, giving them that nudge. And philanthropic psychologists talk about it's a difference between liking and loving. Okay, somebody who likes you, boy, they got this nice tent, and so on. You know, it'll shape their attitudes about you in that moment. But if somebody loves you, they don't care if you have a tent. So you know, if you got a lot of likers, then I think maybe a tent would be a good idea. But don't worry about it for the lovers, because they're going to be there for you as long as you're thanking them and telling them what a wonderful work that they're doing through you.
Love it. All right, next one. If you have a run event with a registration fee, should you advertise ahead of time that at a certain level of fundraising, you will earn a champion's medal? All right, I have to say this out loud. I think of the 5K as the spawn of Satan. It's like all the worst attributes from walks and endurance events brought together in one tight little money losing event. So I guess it's hard to answer the question without talking about that whole construct and why it's hard to raise net revenue that way and to retain people who have an affinity to the mission. You can run a great run, you can put on a great run and serve people who want to run really well all day long for a small net profit. But in terms of finding and nurturing people who are really attached to you, probably not. But we can talk more. Hit me by email. Randy, HAS tried the VIP tent for those that raised 500 or more, and it wasn't very successful. Sounded like a good idea. So she had a poor experience with that. And then Emily said, do you have a favorite type of fundraising event or peer-to-peer campaign style? Well, I'll tell you what my favorite is right now. My favorite right now is something that manifests in the community and is run by a peer-to-peer volunteer. And I think we are going to see a huge and positive transition from this. And I'm going to give you one example. One of my employees, Megan Rouse, she's just one of those amazing people. She came up with an idea. We had talked about what do people need right now? What will make them happy? And she realized what people want most, at least the people I know, they want a connection to the community. They feel disconnected. And so she came up with an activity that she ran in her neighborhood. It was a peer-to-peer fundraising activity. She was the primary peer fundraising. She hit all of her neighbors. She'd only lived there for 8 months, keep in mind. And then she ran an activity, very simple, at 9:00 on Saturday night. We're all going to light luminaria bags in front of our house. And that was the connecting device that she needed to deliver the gift of community to make these people happy. She raised $15,000 in a week. And then the local junior league picked it up. They raised another 45 or 60, I can't remember the total. But that right now, I think, is, again, designing for the human being instead of, what's my favorite activity? What do I want to run? What does the organization need me to run? No. What do the people need? What do the people need? So she was able to engage her entire community. Think about that. She got to virtually every house in her community, which means now, in terms of data collection, that one peer-to-peer fundraiser who might have gone to the high school track and participated in their event or the park, she would have been taken out of her community to go into the nonprofits, structured community. Instead, she stayed in her community and ended up digging way deeper into her community for data collection and revenue purposes. So it's not really fluffy. When you get down to it, we're talking about raising revenue and using psychology to do it. I'm going to go over to the chat. You guys have been great. You guys, these are so nice. A nice comment from Nancy Cook. This makes complete sense for our future. In a world where we need to purge our closets and homes, the last thing we need is more stuff. We need more gratitude and recognition and kindness. This youth-centric approach will grow our donors through personalized recognition and not gifts. Hallelujah. Sing it, sister. Emily said to the panelists, I just got a packet of wildflowers from a local park I donated to. Tiny donation, just something to say thank you from me to the park for being open during COVID. Had no idea they were going to send me something. Turned me into a monthly donor. Here's a question. Are there variations in communicating with different age groups? Otis?
Variations? Not really. I think that, again, digging in the research, I was surprised to learn how old donors are. People 55 and over make up the vast majority of donors. So I think that, I watched the Barack Obama high school graduation thing, and I didn't know hardly any of the artists. So, you might want to talk about the Eagles instead of some kind of a hip hop artist. But I really don't think so. A sincere thank you is really kind of a universal to people.
Yep. Let's see. I'm looking for questions here. Corinne said, your first date sounded amazingly nerdy. And yes, it was. Oh gosh. All right. I think we're good. I think we've done it. Hey, on Wednesday, we have a webinar. We're going to talk about accessibility. Otis mentioned our donors are old. They are, and we are pushing them online. And while people like you and me and Otis might be used to being online and able to maneuver, many of our constituents are not. So we're going to have a disability specialist on the line with us. Her name is Deborah Rue. It's just going to be a conversation, but what we're going to talk about are the challenges of pushing an aging group suddenly and completely online, and what some of the barriers that they will face are. So she'll be talking through high level how to accommodate those people so that, you know, if you build a great device, a great tool, a great activity, and you've met human needs, that they are not blocked by the barrier of getting online to get to you. So her name is Deborah Rue. She is internationally known, and she's got purple hair. What more could you ask for? I think that's it. Otis, you got anything else?
I do not.
All right. This felt an awful lot like an episode of Stuff You Should Know, which is like my favorite podcast. So.
Just want to say thank you to everyone. And one thing I'm interested in, I keep hearing about virtual events. I'm just wondering when it's going to switch over and we're just going to start saying events. We're not even going to bother to say virtual anymore because the day is coming.
Yep. Just like we don't say digital marketing anymore. It's just marketing, right?
Right.
All right. Everyone, thank you so much. It's a happy meal in my future. Bye-bye.